Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to get philosophical?
Always ready. What are we diving into today?
Well, today we're taking on Søren Kierkegaard, specifically his Christian Discourses, published way back in 1848.
Ooh, Kierkegaard, he's a deep one.
He is. But that's why we're here, right? To really unpack these complex ideas. And trust me, these discourses, they're not just some dusty old theological texts. They're actually surprisingly relevant to, well, to being human in the 21st century.
That's what's so fascinating about Kierkegaard, right? He was grappling with a lot of the same things we still struggle with today: anxiety, guilt, even trying to figure out what love really means.
Exactly. And in these discourses, he lays out some pretty profound insights into how to deal with all that. He breaks it down into four main series: the cares of the pagans, thoughts that wound from behind, exhortations to confession, and for the grand finale, thoughts on the work of love. So buckle up.
Lots to unpack there. And for folks who maybe aren't as familiar with Kierkegaard, can you give us a little background on who he was and why he still matters today?
Yeah, totally. So Kierkegaard, he was a Danish philosopher, theologian, and let's be honest, a bit of a provocateur. He lived in the 19th century, but his ideas were way ahead of his time. He's actually considered the father of existentialism.
Existentialism, huh? That sounds pretty heavy.
It can be. But basically, it's all about exploring the meaning of existence, individual freedom, and the choices we make in a world that can often feel, well, absurd. And Kierkegaard was all about finding authentic ways to live in the face of that absurdity.
Okay, I'm starting to see why he's still relevant today. We're definitely living in absurd times.
Right. So let's start with this idea of pagan worry that Kierkegaard talks about in the Cares of the Pagans.
Yeah.
He contrasts it with the peace that he believes is found in Christian faith.
Right.
But even if we're not approaching this from a strictly religious perspective, how can we relate this idea of pagan worry to our own lives today?
That's a great question, and I think it's actually incredibly relevant to how we live today. Think about it. We're constantly bombarded with messages about what we should be doing, what we should be achieving, who we should be. Social media is basically a highlight reel of everyone else's seemingly perfect lives. And it's easy to get caught up in that, to start worrying about whether we measure up.
It's like that fear of missing out, the FOMO that everyone talks about.
Exactly. And Kierkegaard might say that this obsession with curating the perfect image, chasing the next promotion, or constantly striving for more is a form of pagan worry. It's putting our hope and security in things that are ultimately temporary and outside of our control.
So it's not just about material possessions.
No, it's about anything that we make the center of our lives, anything that we rely on for our sense of worth or happiness. It could be our careers, our relationships, our social status, anything that we cling to out of fear or a need to prove ourselves.
So how do we escape this pagan worry trap? I mean, it feels like it's everywhere.
Well, Kierkegaard believed that true peace doesn't come from achieving worldly success or accumulating more stuff. It comes from finding a foundation for our lives that can't be shaken by the ups and downs of external circumstances.
Okay, so that's step one, letting go of that worldly worry. But then Kierkegaard takes us even deeper. He challenges us to confront those things that haunt us from within, our past mistakes and regrets. He explores this a lot in Thoughts That Wound from Behind and Exhortations to Confession.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. Kierkegaard was a big believer in the power of confession, but not confession as in some kind of punishment. He saw it as a path to healing and growth.
So it's not about dwelling in guilt.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging our shortcomings, taking responsibility for actions, and then, crucially, moving forward. He believed that by facing those wounds from behind, those things we try to bury or ignore, we could actually free ourselves from the burden of unacknowledged guilt.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, today we see confession playing out in all sorts of ways, especially on social media. You see these public apologies that often feel kind of forced or performative.
Yeah.
Is that what Kierkegaard had in mind?
I don't think so. For Kierkegaard, confession was about radical honesty and self-reflection. It's not for show, it's for the sake of our own growth and understanding. It requires us to be vulnerable, to admit our wrongs not to an audience, but maybe to ourselves, to the people we've hurt, or maybe even to something bigger than ourselves.
Right. It's about seeking genuine forgiveness, not just likes or retweets.
Exactly. So we've talked about anxiety, guilt. Hello, let's get to the good stuff. Love. In Thoughts on the Work of Love, Kierkegaard really throws out those Hallmark card notions of love and gets real.
He does. And this is where I think Kierkegaard's ideas can be really challenging, but also incredibly rewarding.
Absolutely. He was adamant that love isn't just some passive feeling that washes over you. It's an active choice we make every day. It's a way of being in the world.
So it's less about those butterflies in your stomach feelings and more about, well, what?
It's about putting others' needs before our own. It's about showing compassion even when it's hard. It's about choosing forgiveness even when we've been hurt. It's about seeing the humanity in others even when they're difficult to love. He famously said, and this is one of my favorite Kierkegaard quotes, "Love is not a feeling, it is an act of will."
Wow. An act of will. That's really powerful. So how does this love in action actually play out in our everyday lives? Can you give us a specific example from how Kierkegaard talks about it?
Sure. One that really resonates with me is when Kierkegaard talks about how true love isn't about finding the perfect person. It's about choosing to love the person in front of you, flaws and all. It's about recognizing that everyone is on their own journey, everyone is struggling in some way, and it's about offering grace and compassion, even when it's undeserved.
It's about seeing beyond the surface,
Yeah.
right, to that shared humanity we all have.
Yes. And he also believed that love shouldn't be limited to our inner circle, to our family and friends. He felt that it should extend to all of humanity. It's about recognizing that interconnectedness we all share.
And I think we see examples of that kind of love all around us, even if we don't always recognize it. The healthcare workers who put themselves at risk to care for others, the activists who fight for social justice, the everyday people who go out of their way to help those in need.
Exactly. Those are all examples of Kierkegaard's love in action. It's choosing to make a difference, however small, in the lives of others.
So let's bring this back to our listeners. If Kierkegaard were our life coach today, what one piece of advice do you think he would give us based on everything we've discussed?
That's a great question. I think he would probably tell us to stop getting caught up in all that pagan worry and comparison. He'd tell us to be courageous enough to face our mistakes and seek genuine forgiveness, not just from others, but also from ourselves.
And to remember that love is a choice, not a feeling.
Yes, exactly. He would urge us to choose to love actively in every interaction, big or small.
Wow. That's some seriously timeless wisdom almost 200 years later. It's like Kierkegaard is still speaking directly to us today.
He really is. Reading Kierkegaard can be a little challenging at times, but it's so worth it.
It's like having a philosophical sparring partner,
Right.
pushing you to think deeper, to question your assumptions.
Yeah. You might not always agree with him, but he'll definitely make you think.
And maybe even help you find a new way of being in the world. So if you're ready to wrestle with some big questions, to go on that philosophical journey, I highly recommend checking out Christian Discourses for yourself. You might be surprised by what you discover.
I second that.
And until next time, keep diving deep.